Welcome back to Tokyo Ghoul Anime Review. This is episode number 14. This one reviewing the 14th episode of the Tokyo Ghoul Anime Vault White Darkness. This one, like with last week's episode, we have like about 9 chapters. This one adapted for this one. Now, does this one cover from like 69 to like, I don't know, like 67? 77? Nope. It's actually quite weird. Okay, the chapters it adapts is chapters 69 to 76, pages 11 to 18 of chapter 81 and 82. And that's it. That's what this one adapts. This episode picks up from last week's episode, and yes, Toka is in this episode. She does briefly interact with Kaneki for like one scene. I mean, the episode opens up exactly where last week's episode left off, with Kaneki going to Himari's cell, getting her out, and yeah, her saying she's happy. Apparently, she's happy to be died, and then she slaps him. And of course, then next time she's seen, she's with Kaneki running the hall, battles one of the doves, one of the CGC people. Though he's wearing a black coat for some reason. And then, of course, Kaneki is next seen in, like, we have to beat this guy. He's next seen battling Armon. And this fight takes pretty much the rest of the episode. And there's also a flashback with Renji, where you see a flashback where he's known Toka and Arkamon, Toka's brother, known them since they were kids. He's practicing with Toka since she was a baby. Yeah, and I really like her mother's line is like, she's as cute as me. Implying possibly Renji may have had a thing for Toka's mother. Possibly, but it's never revealed. See a little bit of his blow backstory. And of course, when Kaneki shows up, Kaneki versus Armin takes up pretty much the rest of the whole entire episode. And the episode ends with Arkamon just killing himself after Kaneki switch back from at last week's episode he switched from white to black. That happened in episode 12. This one he's back to being the white hair. He's back to having white hair. Yep. Well, that didn't last very long. Him going back to his regular original raven hair look that he had at the start of the series. Also, Rise is mentioned in this episode. Yeah, she's actually referenced a couple times in the series in this episode. Yep. And the episode ends with, the fight between Kaneki and Arkamon ends with Arkamon knowing that Kaneki would not kill him. Of course, this is after Kaneki destroys his Queen K. He takes his Queen K and slits his own throat. Because he knows Kaneki won't kill him, so he decided to kill himself. Despite the fact that Kaneki kind of beat him. And of course, when they have Toka, Akino, and Renji meet up with Himari, because the way the shot looks like that Toka's going to slap her, instead she just pulls at her cheeks. It's like, he says, she's just stupid, Himari. Eventually, together, of course, Edo decides to help out, goes to one of her forms. This is probably not her main form. Goes to this giant size form, goes on a rampage, destroying part of the place, and she gets a fight with the guy that Kaneki briefly fought for like a few minutes. And she's kind of taken back into custody. Kaneki, decides to show off new abilities in this episode. Like, apparently he could change arms to like lobster arms. He can form things out of the ground. It's a really cool fight. I gotta praise the anime for doing that. Excuse me. What else? I think I covered mostly everything I could think of. Yeah. And this was a pretty good episode. I like the pacing for this one. And it's a little bit better than last week's. Last week's felt a little bit rushed. This one, I think they kind of learned from their mistake. So the pacing was actually a lot better in this episode than it was in last week. Last week felt a little bit rushed. This one felt very natural. And that's how pacing that I got used to during the first season of Re. So yeah, the pacing has gotten better. But I think that this is what I'm hoping. And looks like next week's episode looks like they're going to finally have what happened to the one character who apparently died in Route A. Yeah, it turns out his life turned an official ghoul. I'm hoping at some point they actually do cover, they do adapt Chapter 59. Unknown why they decided to skip over it for. It's really weird. because at the end of the first season, they ended with chapter 58. And then they skip over to 59 for some strange reason and go straight to chapter 60. My personal guess is that next week's episode probably will cover chapters 77 through, I'd say, 80, probably the first 10 pages of chapter 81. It'll probably go from 83 to maybe 86, maybe. But who knows? I'm hoping at some point they cover chapter 59. Yeah, and at this point, they're probably going to get through this series pretty quickly. Yeah, and the way they're doing it is kind of weird. It's like 9 chapters. That's the equivalent of one manga book. Yeah, so they're basically adapting like over 100 pages for one episode. Yeah, it's particularly very weird of how the series goes. Otherwise, though, that's really it for this particular view. I gotta say, it was a much better episode than last week's. Because, like I said last week, it felt a little bit rushed. I heard a lot of people didn't like last week's episode due to they thought the pacing was terrible and felt very rushed. This episode didn't feel very rushed. It felt very gradual, and it did kind of feel like at points that they did cut some stuff here and there. But I don't think the cuts this episode were that bad. I mean, yeah, they did turn down some blood, some of the violence stuff in the manga for this episode, but it's fine. I personally don't have a problem with it. It's okay. So yeah, not much else to say about this episode. So yeah, next 2 videos I'm going to do are reviews of the new chapter of 7 Deadly Sins and new chapter for Hunter x Hunter. Expect those videos pretty soon, okay? Alright, until I see you in the next video, bye.